Welcome to the Brendan G podcast. And today we're going to be discussing gut health and mental health and the connection between the two. And I'm joined by producer and researcher Joe, and he's going to be asking me some questions about this connection. And actually, before we launch into this, I want to introduce this very interesting study that came out back in 1998, just to give everyone a flavor of what's going on here. There's a bacteria, which is not a good bacteria. It's a deleterious bacteria that was introduced to rats. It's called Campylopore bacteria. And it showed that after just small doses of this bacteria was introduced into the digestive tract of these rats, it led to anxiety-like behaviors. That is directly from the researchers who put this study together without any accompanying immune response to it. And so obviously there is a connection between gut health and depression and anxiety, and we're gonna talk about that more. So go right ahead, Joe.
Thank you. So, the first thing we were talking about and that we have lined up is, can you explain in more detail just the direct connection between gut health and mental health? I think that explanation with the rats is very clear, but we had some other material we're looking over, right? So,
Yeah. Well, just if you look at the neurology, right, the central nervous system itself. So when we're talking about the digestive tract and, say, the midbrain, they're actually connected by a very thick nerve called the vagus nerve. And this vagus nerve, we used to think that it just went one way, down and sort of told the gut what to do. Turns out that there's a very complex pathway. It's a two-way pathway between the midbrain and the gut. And what happens is that neurological pathway, there's a communication between the bacteria in your digestive tract, friendly and deleterious meaning bad acting bacteria, and your midbrain. And specifically, this connects the HPA axis, which is three glands. It's the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal. And that more or less makes up your endocrine system. And for anybody with a background in understanding what those glands do, they are central in the regulation of stress and cortisol. And cortisol is a stress hormone. So deleterious or unfriendly bacteria in your digestive tract can release chemicals signaling through the vagus nerve to the midbrain, negatively impacting stress, jacking up your cortisol levels. And that's aside from any potential inflammation that you have down in your digestive tract, which will, again, promote cortisol, that stress hormone. So that's that connection right there.
all right, thank you. So it's they both your brain and your gut talk, I guess, right? It would be a good
And as a
way
matter
to
of
look
fact,
at things, right?
yeah, and just to throw, and I know this is kind of outside the bacteria conversation, but it is also gut health. When you have a candida overgrowth, they release aldehydes that also communicate to that vagus nerve. And when it gets to the midbrain, it starts to signal people to consume sugar and carbohydrates. So a lot of times our cravings are also dictated by this, what we commonly refer to as the dysbiosis in our digestive tract.
Okay. All right. So I guess the next thing was, why should we avoid processed foods? How do those play into this? I mean, obviously we know most processed foods are not very healthy. So how could they negatively affect your gut health? And also, is there any positive processed foods? Is not everything a TV dinner, right? Is there any potential good
Yeah, I don't
ones?
know
So,
if there's too many positive processed foods, but there certainly are a lot of negative processed foods. So I'm a big believer in just go with the stuff that's not created by a large corporation. Go right to the produce section, go to the meats. That's really where you're going to find a lot of your nutrition anyway. When we're talking about processed foods, we're talking about things that are typically heavy in seed oils. And these seed oils are rancid, both because of their origin, how they are produced, where they come from, the chemical makeup of them, and also in the actual production. So that a lot of times they're superheated under high pressure, and that alone will make them rancid and make them pro-oxidants. And obviously, antioxidants are fantastic and they're very healthy for you. But pro-oxidants do the opposite. They go around and they damage everything. So that's one of the reasons why you want to avoid those things. Sugars, carbohydrates, that's kind of an obvious one. Antibiotics, prescription drugs. So all of these things actually lead to a degradation in beneficial bacteria. And some of these are foods for the deleterious, bad acting bacteria. So that's how you're going to get this dysbiosis. And when I talk about dysbiosis, it's just a fancy word for it's out of balance. So this bacteria that you have inherited when you were born, it gets degraded over time because of diet, and stress, and prescription drugs and antibiotics and all the rest of it. The food stream, you got, if you're not eating clean meats, then you are probably taking in a lot of antibiotics unbeknownst to you through the meats that you eat. Okay, so I remember I was at a conference one time with a group of doctors, and I was telling them that, the majority of people are getting antibiotics and it's going up. And the doctors, they all raised their hand. No, we're prescribing much less antibiotics. I said, yeah, you are prescribing less antibiotics. Good on you. But the problem is that the food, the cattle, the pork, the poultry, that stuff's going up through the roof. And that's where people are getting their antibiotic use now. Over 50% of the antibiotics that the pharmaceutical industry makes now goes into the food stream. So that's where we're getting it.
That actually gives me a good question. What's the best way to avoid those? I mean, is the only way is to shop local? Like, Purdue with their massive chicken farms, obviously they're going to be full of antibiotics. So what would be some advice on trying to stay away from antibiotic meat? Do you have any info on that?
Definitely shop local. No doubt about that. So, if you can find a nice local farmer, ask him a lot of questions, him or her, and find out if they are giving their livestock GMO corn. Is a majority of it grass-fed? What kind of antibiotics are they using? If they're using any, obviously the answer that you want to hear is no. One of the things in our industry that farmers, especially cattle farmers, used to use as a substitute for antibiotics is Epicor, it's natural and it's chock full of B vitamins, and it's very good at stimulating the cattle's immune system. And this is how the good farmers used to keep their cattle healthy. We now have it in human form too, so you can take it in human form. But so there are definitely questions you should be asking the local farmers for sure. And I should say, just so that we get some idea of how big this problem is. So 300 million people suffer from clinical depression. So that is individuals who have gone to the doctor, have been diagnosed and been given a script. Now, not everybody that's suffering from depression and anxiety goes to see a doctor, first of all. Some people don't have access to see a doctor, even if they wanted to see a doctor. And even if they see a doctor, sometimes they don't get the script. So you can clearly see that is a large number, but it's probably even bigger than that. And let's throw one more in there, right? 72% of Americans say that they have had at least twice a month had a digestive issue. Okay, so this is the connection between mental health and digestive health.
Yeah, so could you go into a little bit more about that, of how much your gut health is affecting your mental health, and with the different hormones that are usually related to depression? I mean, they're all mostly created in your gut, right? So I feel like people are overlooking how impactful diet and your gut health really is.
Right. So, and this one's critical, right? So most people don't think about beneficial bacteria producing some of the critical, minerals and byproducts. These are called secondary metabolites. When the bacteria themselves receive the food that we eat and then they break them down, and as a byproduct, they end up spinning things off that we need that are crucial for our overall health. One of them is vitamin K2. That's one that a lot of folks know. If you have a baby that's just been born K2 is really important for blood clotting, and you have to have that produced by your bacteria. Sometimes the hospital or the doctor will give you an injection of K2 so that you won't, so the baby won't bleed out. Okay, that's one example. But a better example in this case, we're talking about gut health and mental health, is serotonin. So serotonin is the happy hormone. All right. And it's a precursor for melatonin too. So it helps you go to sleep. It soothes you. It reduces anxiety, reduces overthinking, I guess, more or less. Right. But 80% of serotonin is made by bacteria in your digestive tract. So if you have damaged digestive tract or dysbiosis or SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or candida overgrowth, or any of these other things, you're definitely getting a lot less serotonin, and that's going to make you more anxious, and it's going to negatively impact your stress levels. And for sure, that's going to have an impact on anxiety, depression. And as a matter of fact, there is a study, as I just looked this up the other day. Hold on a minute. There is a study, fairly recent one. So this is released by the Journal of Holistic Nursing just back in March of 2024. So for the purposes of this recording, fairly recent. And it shows that research has shown a link between dysbiosis, which we're talking about, and the inflammatory response system that are known to contribute to depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. Now, obviously, that's the extreme scenario, schizophrenia, but the connection between poor gut health and schizophrenia has obviously been identified by researchers in lots of studies. This is just the most recent occurrence. Again, we talked about some of the foods that they should probably avoid eating. That's an obvious one, but it's not just diet. For instance, when you start to surpass the age of 30, the body's ability to create digestive enzymes drops off pretty dramatically. And digestive enzymes are a requirement, okay, for properly breaking down your food from macro nutrients into micronutrients, where they can be recognized and further broken down by bacteria and then uptake or straight up uptake from your digestive tract through epithelial cells or the tight junctions in between. Okay, so having things like a protease that breaks down protein or a lipase that breaks down fat, those are really critical. So I would encourage everybody to incorporate those into your diet, especially if you have a liver issue. Let's say,
I just want to interject. What would be, you're talking about things that would break down proteins and fats. I'm not familiar with what those would be. Like, what would be some foods or ways that I could get those into my digestive
it would be
tract?
so it would be a digestive supplement. So you get a digestive enzyme that would be a lipase that breaks down fat, or a protease that breaks down protein. Okay, those
so
are the types of things.
So you primarily get it through a supplement, though, not
Yeah,
necessarily
you
through
get it
diet.
through a supplement. Yep,
Okay.
you have to. Making digestive enzymes in the body is a very energy intense process. And again, if people have built up blockages, like let's say they have a fatty liver or a gallbladder that's sluggish, that bile's not flowing from the liver and nothing's getting through the gallbladder, they're definitely not creating enough of lipase. So their inability to break down fats definitely exists. And I would imagine as what we also see is an inability to break down proteins. So they don't make enough proteases either. So that would help. The other thing is to take a supplement that reduces inflammation. Like quercetin's a good one. It's all natural. Take in enough zinc. So when you have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, you have deficiencies in zinc, magnesium, and B1. Those are the major ones. B1 being one of those vitamin deficiencies that's related to anxiety. Okay, so we can see now, well, actually, zinc and magnesium too, also related to anxiety. So we can see if you have that breakdown in your gut health and you have these deficiencies, how those also help to negatively impact your anxiety levels. So if you up those through supplementation, you can do two things. You can better your mental health, and you can also better your gut health. You also can incorporate like a coating mechanism like slippery elm or marshmallow root, and that helps to produce a protective lining that typically people that have poor gut health don't have. We produce mucus. It's a mucosal lining that coats the digestive tract and prevents pathogenic substances and other parasites and all the things that you don't want in your circulatory system from getting in touch with you. So when they're not there, you're a little bit more prone to damage. And so those are the things that you should probably think about incorporating.
I guess the last thing we kind of covered everything for today, but we were talking about dairy and fiber and the quantities people might be taking of those. You want to maybe close out on that, on some of the goods, the bad, and the ugly of dairy and fiber.
Yeah, so. Right. So again, and dairy is interesting because it's an allergen. So typically when people are like, okay, I'm going to get my gut health back in check, I'm going to start eating better, I'm going to start taking in yogurt, and they end up taking way too much yogurt, too much dairy. Lactobacillus is important for the digestive tract, but oftentimes people are consuming too much dairy, and that is also a problem. So that's going to create a dysbiosis as well. That's the imbalance part, right? You don't want too much of one thing. You want everything in proper balance. And there's also an issue with A1 protein in this country. The cows in this country are A1 protein producers, which means, and that is a protein that the body does not recognize. So sometimes you'll walk into a grocery store and you'll see A2 milk. Well, obviously, number one, that's a cow that is probably predominantly in Europe. And so it's probably coming from Europe. Might not be. But that is, so the A1 protein, is it inflammatory? If it's not in your dairy, then it's not inflaming you and you consume it, no problem, okay? So those are some of the tips on taking care of dairy. Don't overconsume it. It's not a good idea. And if you can, stay away from A1 protein because the body doesn't recognize it, thinks it's an allergen. The other thing is the one thing that we've been told to take all the time, which is fiber. And there's a lot of, believe it or not, there's a lot of scientists that are somewhat, I guess this is a controversial topic, is more or less what I'm saying. And the reason that they used to say you should take a lot of fiber is that, and I'm gonna go right down this list. Well, for one thing, consuming a lot of fiber contributes to cognitive decline because it pulls cholesterol and fat out of the body. And this is the same problem that we have with statin drugs. Statin drugs are supposed to lower your HDL and LDL and start, promote proper cardiac health. But also what it does is it pulls the building blocks for central nervous system repair, and it pulls it right out of the body. Okay, and that's definitely something you don't want to do, and it's pro-inflammatory, believe it or not. The other thing is that it promotes bacteria that cause inflammation. Okay, the fiber feeds bacteria that cause irritation. In these fermented foods, the fermentation itself causes inflammation. So too much fiber is something to be avoided. And I'm going to just remind people that the Inuit Eskimos don't have any fiber in their diet whatsoever. I mean, these guys are girls. They're consuming whale blubber and meat. All right, they're not gnawing on fiber. This is not, there's no Metamucil up there, and they are perfectly healthy. And so those are just a couple of examples of why you should limit dairy, and then go for A2 when possible, and limit your fiber. There really isn't a huge reason as to why you should put a lot of fiber in your diet. And by the way, you can do a whole host of other things to help if you're having constipation or any other digestive tract issue.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that's I remember that too. It's like, fiber is going to help with your digestive tract and the food pyramid and all that.
Make things move.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, the bacteria in your digestive tract, they can break down aminos and protein as well and produce those fatty acids that have the same effect of elimination. So it's definitely overprescribed as a remedy, that's for sure. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. This is a review of gut health and mental health and how they interact with each other. Tune in for more episodes next week.